WNBA's got a real ratings problem, okay? The ratings came out for the Indiana Fever without Caitlin Clark game. I saw some people actually trying to spin this as a positive, and I was like, they're light, 235,000 viewers.
Nobody wanted to deal with empty seats, falling ratings, and a league trying to explain why everything just fell apart without one superstar. But the WNBA playoffs were a harsh reality check. The numbers don't lie. This is now about survival rather than just basketball. What do you think about a league that loses almost half of its viewership when one player isn't playing? Leave a comment below.
The Fever stink without Caitlin Clark. It is rough. It has been a rough stretch. I thought that Indiana would split the 4 games that she was out if she was going to be out 4 games. I guess that's still on the table, but not.
Here we go once more. People, it's another WNBA catastrophe that nobody saw coming except for everyone who has been watching. The playoffs are here. With Caitlin Clark gone, the league that was boasting of record-breaking results is now looking at empty seats and ratings that fell more quickly than a reality show contestant.
The Indiana Fever literally just gave everything they had against the worst team in the league, and they still lost. You still lost. That was probably the best performance you're going to get in this stretch of games without Caitlin Clark down that stretch. I mean, they came back from down 15 points. They went on a 16-0 run.
Allow me to illustrate this complete train wreck for you. Clark's final playoff matchup with Connecticut her second season concluded with approximately 2.54 million viewers and the most viewed playoff game since Clark's elimination drew an incredible 929,000 viewers. We're talking about losing over half the audience in a single week, so it's not just a decline, it's a total collapse. However, please reiterate that the league doesn't require Clark. This math is so harsh that it ought to be marked with a warning. When the Liberty and Aces, ostensibly the 2 best teams in the league, faced off in what everyone called a championship preview, they managed to scrape together 929,000 viewers from the same time slot, same network, and same day of the week. The only difference was that it wasn't even close to being a Caitlin Clark coincidence. Clark's playoff debut drew 1.4 million viewers on a Sunday afternoon, competing directly with NFL football.
To be clear about this, if Caitlin Clark were not in the WNBA, we would not be talking about the WNBA. She is the only ticket draw in the WNBA. A large percentage of all tickets sold in the WNBA are so people can watch Caitlin Clark play basketball. No one cares about Angel Reese. She'd be drawing flies if she were playing not against Caitlin Clark on the court right now. Angel Reese has basically become the Bill Laimbeer to Caitlin Clark's Larry Bird, essentially. That is where we now are.
But hold on, there's more hilarious material here. Since fans had fallen in love with the game itself, WNBA executives and media personalities spent an entire season telling us that Clark was simply riding the wave of an already expanding league. They also insisted that viewership would remain high regardless of who was playing. Congratulations to everyone who thought that fairy tale came true. You just watched it come to life. When Clark was coming to town, Vegas moved their game against Indiana from a 12,000-seat arena to an 18,000-seat venue. Washington did the same thing, and several teams upgraded their facilities specifically because of Clark's drawing power. The attendance story is equally embarrassing, despite the league's best efforts to spin it in a different way.
WNBA, they're having troubles with tickets now because I think Caitlin Clark is out for what? How many weeks is she out? She's rolled out for the June 7th game. That's when she was supposed to meet up with Angel Reese again. And Chicago Sky, and there's a massive drop in ticket sales. This is after
when the playoffs come around without her, the crowd hardly fills 3/4 of normal-sized arenas. In contrast, the Sunlinks game could only draw 8,500 fans in a 20,000-seat arena, which is not even 50% capacity, while the Liberty Aces game at Barclays Center, which was billed as one of the most anticipated matchups of the season, drew 14 out of 15 fans in an arena that can accommodate over 18,000, which is not even 75% capacity for what was being marketed as a championship-caliber showdown. As if that somehow alters the fact that interest vanished the instant Clark left the building, the same people who spent months downplaying Clark's impact are now working extra hard to explain why these numbers aren't that bad and are actually higher than they were the previous year. It's like celebrating that your house is only partially burned down instead of being completely destroyed. In the regular season, No one wants to confront the elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. Of the 26 games with an average viewership of over 1 million, Clark was in 22 of them. 22 out of 26 is not a coincidence, not a result of good fortune, and most definitely not because people happen to learn about women's basketball at the same moment. When you have a transcendent ability that people genuinely want to watch, like Clark did, you start playing. The WNBA's reaction to these figures has been utterly expected. Rather of facing reality, they are strengthening their claim that everything is okay. They say that viewership is still higher than in prior years, completely ignoring the fact that one player who is no longer participating was solely responsible for those increases. It's like claiming credit for a party's success when the single person who provided the entertainment simply left. What makes this whole situation even more ridiculous is how obvious it was to anyone paying attention. Clark's impact wasn't subtle or hard to measure. Teams were literally changing their entire business operations around her presence. Arena capacity wasn't enough. When she was coming to town, ticket prices skyrocketed for Fever games. Merchandise sales went through the roof. These weren't marginal improvements, they were transformational. Changes. The excuses being thrown around now are absolutely hilarious. While people are busy with football season, really, because football season was happening during Clark's playoff games too, and somehow that didn't stop nearly 2 million people from tuning in. The other teams just need time to build their fan bases, build them into what the same teams that couldn't draw flies to honey before Clark arrived. Here's the reality check that nobody wants to hear. The WNBA's record-breaking 2024 season was a Caitlin Clark phenomenon, not a women's basketball renaissance. The attendance figures attest to that. The viewership statistics support it, and the sharp drop that follows her removal completes the picture. Recognizing what truly occurred is more important than disparaging other players or the league. When you take away Clark's games from the equation, the numbers look much less impressive, but let's keep acting like that's not the case because social media engagement shows that the Fever averaged over 17,000 fans at home and drew huge crowds on the road. The league averaged over 9,800 fans per game during the regular season, which sounds impressive until you realize that Indiana's games were carrying the vast majority of that load. During the 2024 season, NBA accounts received around 2 billion video views, more than quadrupling from the previous year. Can you guess who player was featured in the majority of those viral moments? Here's a hint. The internet wasn't going crazy over A.A. Wilson's free throws. Highlights of Clark. Most of that interaction was being driven by Clark's games and assists. WNBA merchandise sales increased 601% from the previous year, and the great bulk of that increase was in Clark-related products. The merchandise sales explosion follows the same trend. Now that she is out of the playoffs, let's see how those stats hold up. However, this is where things get really interesting. Fever jerseys, Iowa throwback stuff, and everything with Clark's name on it were flying off the shelves. Whether or not the league gained any knowledge from this event will determine its destiny. The proposals for expansion, the increased investment in facilities, is a result of the new media. All of that was based on the notion that the rise in 2024 would be sustained. If Clark's removal demonstrates that the gain was individual rather than league-wide, those investments begin to appear rather hazardous. Clark's impact was evident from the beginning, but rather than building on that success and figuring out how to duplicate it, the league spent half the season dealing with manufactured drama about whether or not she deserved the attention. Players complained about the focus on rookies. This is the most frustrating aspect of the entire situation. Media personalities questioned whether the hype was real, and league officials seemed almost embarrassed by their own success. Now they're paying the price for that short-sightedness instead of having a plan for maintaining interest. After Clark's season ended, they're scrambling to explain why everything suddenly got quiet instead of developing storylines and marketing campaigns that could carry momentum forward. They're watching their record-breaking season turn into a cautionary tale about putting all your eggs in one basket. The timing couldn't be worse either. This is supposed to be the WNBA's moment, the new media deal, the expansion teams, the increased visibility. Everything was lining up perfectly for sustained growth. But sustaining growth requires understanding what drove that growth in the first place, and the league seems genuinely confused about why Clark's absence creates such a massive void. The competition for attention is only getting fiercer. The NFL season is in full swing. The NBA season is about to begin, college basketball is picking up steam, and the WNBA is suddenly vying for attention without their biggest draw. Good luck with that tactic when you've spent months telling people that your league is bigger than any one player. Of course, numbers would decline without her, but look at how much we've grown overall. Pick a lane, people. Either she was driving the bus or she wasn't, but you can't have it both ways depending on which argument is more convenient at the time. The media coverage has been equally dishonest. Rather than recognizing the clear connection between Clark's removal and dwindling interest, we're receiving think pieces about how this proves the league is growing beyond any one player. The mental gymnastics required to arrive at that conclusion would win. Olympic gold. The WNBA just demonstrated that their record-breaking season was based on one player's popularity rather than real growth and interest in women's basketball. The ratings and empty seats don't lie, and the immediate drop in engagement doesn't lie. Everything else is just spin. The saddest part is that this was completely predictable. Anyone who witnessed Clark's influence during her time in college was aware of what would transpire after she entered the professional ranks. The league had one job: to figure out how to keep fans interested beyond Clark's individual games. They failed miserably. Instead of developing long-term storylines, other marketable personalities, or compelling narratives that could carry forward, they became embroiled in arguments about whether Clark deserved the attention she was receiving, and now they're dealing with the fallout from that failure. The huge viewership, sold-out arenas, merchandise sales. All of that was predictable. Empty seats, dropping ratings, and a sobering reminder that creating a sustainable entertainment product calls for multiple transcendent players. The question is whether they will take this lesson to heart or keep acting as though nothing is wrong despite the data showing otherwise. This is the bottom line. Caitlin, the WNBA can spin it however they want, but the empty seats and falling ratings speak louder than any press release or defensive interview they had. They're watching it go away in real time, but let's really break down just how catastrophic this decline has been, because the numbers get even worse when you start connecting the dots. Clark's elimination revealed exactly how dependent the WNBA's success was on her individual presence. It sounds amazing that the WNBA had 154 sellouts during the 2024 regular season, more than triple the 45 sellouts from 2023, until you consider that the Indiana Fever were responsible for the great majority of those sellouts. When Clark wasn't playing, arenas quickly returned to their former state as ghost towns. Fall in viewership, the worldwide impact conveys the same heartbreaking tale. The WNBA had been frantically pursuing women's basketball for decades, and Clark's games were drawing attention to the sport on a global scale. Social media videos of her plays went viral, sparking a global dialogue about the league now known as cricket. Since there isn't anything interesting enough to keep their attention, the world sports media has moved on to other stories. Let's talk about the unspoken ripple effects. Based on the 2024 attendance spike, nearby businesses were getting ready for more foot traffic at WNBA arenas. Eateries, pubs, goods, merchants, parking, and services. Because of the league's record-breaking season, entire local economies were preparing for continuous expansion. Now they're stuck with increased capacity and decreased demand, leaving them to wonder what happened to all those new fans who were ostensibly here to stay. The corporate sponsorship scenario is equally interesting to watch develop. Throughout 2024, businesses were investing in WNBA partnerships on the strength of increased visibility and engagement, but sponsorship agreements are predicated on assured exposure and audience reach, and when your viewership suddenly drops by 50%, those assurances begin to appear dubious. In the upcoming months, anticipate some really awkward discussions between league executives and business partners.